In this video we're going to focus on the key question: what is the local and national significance of the site? And by local we're going to focus on the Doncaster area, and by national we mean across Britain itself. Right from the beginning it's important to emphasise that the Doncaster Plant Works played an integral role in Doncaster's development as a town. Before the Doncaster Plant Works, the area had a population, as we already know, of around 6,000. But by the end of the 19th century, it had a population of around 30,000. And that's why I've described this as having an integral role on the development of the town, because it helped it to grow considerably in size. In addition to that, it also played an instrumental role in the rail industry and in events like World War One and World War Two, and we're going to have a look at what that significance was. Now this video is basically divided up into three different areas. Then we're going to look at the local importance, and we're going to focus on how it affected the local population and indeed the area itself. We'll look at how the plant works was affected on a national level across Great Britain, and then we're going to look into the future. We're going to look at the legacy that it's left, and we're going to see what the future holds for Doncaster and the plant works itself, specifically around the rail industry. So let's have a look at a historical source, and here we've got source A. It's a book entitled 150 Years of Doncaster Plant Works by Peter Tuffrey, and here it outlines that in the 1850s Doncaster was a quiet market town with a population of just 6,000 people. But by the turn of the century, by that we mean 1900, it had been transformed into a busy industrial centre of 30,000 people. And we shouldn't underestimate this bit here where it says being transformed into a busy industrial centre. That's the impact that it had on the town itself. And those people came from different areas of the country seeking work. As it goes on to say, they came from Lancashire, Nottinghamshire, East Anglia, Midlands, and from across the south to find work. So we know that Doncaster grew in size. Moving on from that, we can see the local importance on the population. I really like these photos, how it shows the attitude towards work at the time, and it highlights the dress, and we'll see how it changes slightly. So this is at the beginning of the plant works, around the 1860s, and there's some coppersmiths there. And we can also see a similar period around the 1860s. These are glass workers, and we can see them stood by a train at the site itself. If we look in the background, we can see that's actually on the site by one of the workshops. And if we go down here, we can see this is actually the 1960s. And in the 1960s, it provided lots of work for the town itself. And then going back a bit further at the turn of the century, around 1900, these are some of the carpenters that were employed at the town. So the local importance, it cannot be underestimated that it provides lots of employment. Developing that further, still focus on the local community, we know that there were social groups set up. So here we've got the Plant Works football team, and they were the clerks that actually worked in the admin section of the site, and here they are winning the Doncaster Challenge Cup. In addition to that, that is the Doncaster Plant Works Amateur Boxing Association. That association still exists today. Lots of young people still getting themselves involved with the Plant Works amateur boxing. And then moving on from that, I've got a historical source here that outlines the so-called social impact with regards to visiting the coast. So it says here, this is by a lady called Nina Fitzhenry. She's talking about childhood in Hexthorpe in 1839, and she said, "My dad's pub was always busy. I remember when we had our first one in Hexthorpe by the Plant Works. My goodness, we were full to the rafters on a weekend, and he always had to get extra staff to cope. We were always popular with the brewery because of how much beer we sold." Now this is the key bit here. Our club trips to Blackpool, Skegness or Scarborough were legendary. The workers from the plant all brought their families on day trips to the coast on the trains. We would always have a wonderful time. Back then, these were the first kinds of holidays that people had. And it's this bit here with regards to back then, it was the first kinds of holidays that people had. So it actually had a positive social impact on the community. It's also important for us to highlight the impact that the site had on the local surroundings and the buildings. So here we can see on the left we've got Hexthorpe. If we just zoom in there, we can see the site up at the top. This is where the site was, and all of this housing here, this terraced housing, all of these different streets here that we can see, this terraced housing was set up in order to support the workers that would work at the site. And then in addition to that, on the right hand side, we've got Hyde Park. And Hyde Park is exactly the same. So if we just zoom in again, all of these different areas here, we can see the terraced housing. So we've got the site which is just there. That's Wabtec, Hexthorpe's here, and just to the east of that, all of this area here in Hyde Park, we can see Hyde Park is based there. We've got all of this terraced housing, hundreds and hundreds of different houses, and that was the impact that it had locally in terms of developing the area and the suburbs and neighbourhoods around in Doncaster. Now, it's also really important to highlight the impact that the site had on local businesses. And if we look at this historical source here, we can see that in the book written by Michael Johnson, The Benefits of the Railway, it says, the thousands of people that were employed by the Doncaster Plant Works benefited the town immensely. For instance, the majority of workers had families and they needed everything that a family needs: bread, meat, vegetables, clothes, coal, and so on. And the key point about this is the effect that it had on other different markets and businesses. It goes on and says, consequently, the markets benefited because they sold more food, the butchers benefited because they sold more meat, the bakers benefited because they sold more bread, and so on. In many instances, local businesses had to expand and employ more people in order to meet what people were buying. The knock-on effect on Doncaster was considerable. This is known in economic terms as a cycle of prosperity. That when more people are employed, they have more money to spend, and they will spend it in shops, so those shops need to employ more people. And that dramatically benefited the town. It had a massive impact. To highlight that further, we've got here a local business, and they were a brass and iron works, and Woodhouse and Co. Woodhouse and Co Limited, they would actually sell brass fittings that would help all the different kinds of machinery. So Woodhouse and Co is an example. You can see they're based in Hexthorpe in Doncaster. That's an example of how local businesses would also benefit. And then developing this idea of impact and importance even further, we need to look at the national importance of the site. And it really must be emphasised the role that Sir Nigel Greasley had on the site with regards to when he designed the Flying Scotsman and the Mallard. And here we have Sir Nigel Greasley, a famous person that was linked to the site. And this led to railway becoming, in some instances in first class, really luxurious, and there was a romanticism of first class, and that romanticism spread to the Flying Scotsman and the rail industry nationally. So as we can see here right at the top, we've got the Flying Scotsman, and that had a massive impact on the rail industry, because don't forget it held the record for 100 miles per hour. It had the record distance when it would travel from London to Edinburgh, and it opened up so many possibilities of travel and travelling longer distance, and the world became more of an exciting place as people could experience that. And that developed even further with the Mallard as well. So it can't be underestimated the impact that the site had nationally. We can see there in the background the Doncaster Plant Works site itself. But the romanticism of these steam trains and the fact that they broke speed barriers and length barriers also had a considerable impact on British rail industry. Linking back to the national importance, here we've got 4 photos, but on the left hand side we've got photos linked to World War One. And we've already emphasised in previous videos, but it's useful to recap that when we look at this one here, women did the jobs that men had left behind. This was vital for the war effort. The demand for soldiers was so high that women had to fill the jobs that they left, and they did that at the site itself. In addition to that, we know that the site was used for munition work, and by 1916 the site was producing 1,000 heavy artillery shells per week. This was vital work for the war effort as well. On the top right hand side we've got World War Two. During World War II, they also did vital work. So we can see again the Horsa gliders that were used during D-Day, and we also know that the site helped to produce anti-tank and anti-warship guns. So this was of the highest national importance that the site contributed to the war effort for victory. I think it's important that we also look at the legacy and the future. There's no doubt about it that the Plant Works has left a legacy that is influencing the present day and will influence the future. So, for instance, here we've got the Hitachi depot, which is building and repairing the new Azuma trains. These are the high tech. Brand new trains that are going to be on the network within the next few years, and that is only about 5 minutes drive from our school. In addition to that, here what we've got, we can see that all of these different companies here, these are the different companies that revolve around the rail industry. So we've got Polydon Industries, Tinsley Bridge, Unipart Rail, EM Diesel. But I've showed this here because it's to highlight that this is all related to the Doncaster Plant Works. Doncaster has a rich heritage that revolves around the railways, and so that's important to know that there's lots of different businesses. In addition to that, we've got the massive iPort. That's about 7 minutes drive, well, about 10 minutes drive from our school. That's a rail terminal that has international links in terms of moving lots of transportation around, and that's due to Doncaster's infrastructure around rail and its logistics. And then finally, Doncaster is one of two centres nationally that will be the High Speed Rail National College that will provide specialist vocational training for the next generation of engineers. That is literally about a 3 minute drive from our school. So all of these different aspects is highlighted that that the Doncaster Plant Works has had a massive impact locally on the town itself.